Imagine standing on the deck of a pirate ship in the blazing sun of the Caribbean. Salt air stings your face, cannons rumble in the distance, and across from you, a figure steps forward. He is no Hollywood hero in a perfectly tailored coat with golden buttons. His clothes are torn, patched, and stained with sweat. Yet, he carries himself with such confidence that every man on deck treats him like a king. This is the true pirate fashion, not the costume shops, not the polished movie scenes, but the raw reality of what pirates wore and why they wore it. And once you discover the truth, you'll never look at the image of a pirate the same way again. Before we dive in, let me ask you something. If you enjoy exploring history's hidden truths, and if you want to uncover the real world behind the myths, make sure you subscribe. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where and at what hour you're watching this video. I always love seeing our community grow across different corners of the world, and your support helps me bring more stories like this to life. Now, let's return to that deck. The first thing that might shock you is this: pirates didn't dress to impress. They dressed to survive. Forget the fantasy of the perfectly groomed Jack Sparrow. The pirate world was brutal. Salt water destroyed fabric, sun bleached every color, and clothing had to be stolen, bartered, or salvaged. And yet, in this chaos, there was strategy. Pirates dressed with intention, and every item they wore said something about who they were, what they valued, and the risks they were willing to take. Clothes were currency. Imagine raiding a merchant ship and finding bolts of cloth, silk shirts, or Spanish uniforms. These weren't just spoils of war, they were power symbols. A silk sash could mean authority. A pair of sturdy boots could be the difference between life and death in a boarding fight. And a red coat, taken from a soldier, could transform an ordinary pirate into a figure of fear. So when you picture a pirate, don't imagine a single uniform look. Picture a walking collage of survival, stolen pride, and raw ambition. Think about the shirt. At its core, a pirate shirt wasn't glamorous. It was loose, long-sleeved, and practical. Linen or cotton, easy to move in, easy to repair. Pirates needed that mobility, whether climbing, rigging, or swinging a cutlass. But here's the twist: sometimes these plain shirts became statements. Dyed with stolen colors, ripped dramatically, or worn open to the chest to show scars and strength. What began as a basic survival garment became a kind of swagger. The shirt whispered, "I don't need polish. My danger is my fashion." And what about trousers? Unlike noblemen on land, pirates couldn't afford restrictive breeches or delicate fabrics. They needed loose, practical pants slops. They were called baggy and often tied at the knee. Perfect for climbing, perfect for running, perfect for fighting. Yet here again, fashion snuck in. A pirate who wanted to show off might wear brightly colored slops, striped patterns, or even mix fabrics stolen from different cultures. Each pirate, in a sense, became a patchwork story of the ships he'd taken. Every piece was a trophy, worn not just on his body, but on his identity. Footwear was both luxury and torture. The sea devoured shoes. Salt and water destroyed leather quickly, so many pirates went barefoot. It made climbing masts easier, gave better grip on wet decks, and cost nothing. But those who had boots real, heavy boots instantly, marked themselves as higher status. Boots were rare, and rare meant power. Imagine the intimidation of stepping onto a captured ship. the only man wearing tall leather boots while others went barefoot. It wasn't just footwear, it was psychological warfare. Then we get to the accessories, the details that shaped the pirate image: belts, sashes, bandanas. None of these were purely decorative. A belt wasn't just for holding up trousers. It held pistols, knives, powder horns. A sash wasn't just colorful, it was padding wrapped around the waist to protect against sword blows. And a bandana wasn't a style statement first. It kept sweat from the eyes, protected against sunburn, and in emergencies, served as a bandage. Yet, over time, these practical items evolved into symbols. A red sash meant boldness. A striped bandana meant defiance. Pirates turned necessity into swagger, and then jewelry. Gold earrings, silver rings, shiny trinkets. Here we find one of the greatest contrasts between myth and truth. Pirates did wear jewelry, but not just for vanity. A gold earring, for example, had practical meaning. Sailors often pierced their ears because they believed it improved eyesight. Some carried enough gold in their earrings to pay for a funeral if they died far from home. Jewelry was insurance, status, and superstition all rolled into one. And of course, the flash of gold in the sun also said, "I live outside your rules. I flaunt what you can't take from me." But perhaps the most fascinating part of pirate fashion was how it blurred cultures. Remember, pirate crews were not uniform armies. They were melting pots: Africans, Europeans, indigenous people, escaped slaves, ex-soldiers, deserters. And each brought elements of their culture into pirate clothing. West African patterns, Spanish coats, English trousers, Caribbean head wraps, all stitched together by necessity. On a pirate ship, fashion was not dictated by rank or nation. It was dictated by survival and individuality. No admiral would tolerate a sailor wearing a mismatched set of stolen clothes. But pirates thrived on it. The very chaos of their appearance became their identity. Imagine now a merchant captain encountering such a crew. Instead of neat uniforms, he sees a swarm of figures, one in a faded officer's coat, another in bare feet, and bright striped trousers, another with a silk sash tied like a king. It would look less like an army and more like a wild, unpredictable storm. That unpredictability was terrifying. Uniforms meant order. Pirate fashion meant chaos. And chaos was power. This brings us to one of the greatest contradictions. Pirates lived in filth, salt, blood, dirt, and sweat. And yet, they also loved luxury when they could get it. A captain might wear stolen finery, a velvet coat, a plumed hat, just to mock the very society that rejected him. Imagine the irony. A man who stinks of rum and gunpowder striding into port in a nobleman's stolen silk jacket. It was theater, rebellion, and mockery wrapped in one. Every stolen coat said, "I take what I want. Your rules don't apply." And what about weapons? They were part of the pirate look too. A cutlass strapped to the side wasn't just a tool, it was a fashion statement. Pistols tucked into belts made pirates look like walking arsenals. Some carried so many weapons that they rattled when they moved, projecting an image of raw danger. Just as today a flashy car might show off wealth, in the 1700s, a brace of pistols showed off power. The sight alone could break morale before a fight even began. But here's a deeper truth. Pirate fashion was more than survival and swagger. It was freedom. On land, strict rules governed clothing. Laws told you what fabrics you could wear, depending on your class. Only the rich could wear silk. Only nobles could wear velvet. Pirates rejected all of it. They took what they wanted and wore it however they pleased. Imagine the psychological liberation of a poor man, once forbidden to wear fine clothes, now striding across a deck in stolen velvet. Laughing at the world that once kept him down, pirate fashion was rebellion stitched into fabric. And yet, this freedom carried risk. A pirate strutting in finery could be easily recognized in port. A bright red coat might inspire fear on deck, but in a city it could mean instant arrest. So pirates balanced two identities, the flamboyant terror at sea and the disguised survivor on land. Many dressed down in ports, hiding their boldness to avoid capture. Their clothing was both mask and weapon, shifting depending on where they stood. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, if you lived in that world, what would you wear? Would you choose plain, practical clothes to blend in, or bold stolen silks to flaunt your defiance? Would you go barefoot like most, or risk everything for a pair of boots that marked you as a man of status? Pirate fashion wasn't just about fabric. It was about choices, risks, and identity. And this is only the beginning. Because behind every patch, every stripe, every piece of jewelry lies a deeper story about psychology, survival, and the strange democracy of the sea. Pirates may not have left behind palaces or monuments, but they left us something far more intriguing, a glimpse into how clothing itself can become a weapon of freedom and fear. If pirate clothing was rebellion stitched into fabric, then every detail carried more than one meaning. A hat, for example, could be both shade against the scorching sun and a symbol of audacity. Pirates were notorious for stealing hats from officers or noblemen and wearing them not because they fit well, but because they mocked authority. Imagine a ragged sailor striding across a deck in a hat that once belonged to a decorated Spanish commander. The hat might be frayed, stained with blood, or too large, but to the pirate, it wasn't about elegance. It was about conquest. To wear the hat was to wear victory. Headwear, in general, carried fascinating contradictions. While many pirates simply tied cloths around their heads to protect from the sun, others favored wide-brimmed hats, cocked hats, or even plumed hats looted from officers. In one sense, these items were impractical on a windy deck, but that was the point. They were theatrical. A pirate captain striding into battle with a feathered hat was performing a role, crafting an image of fear and unpredictability. It was costume, but one rooted in defiance. Then there's color. Movies have taught us to imagine pirates in black, perhaps with a dash of red. But in reality, color on the sea was rare and precious. Dyes were expensive, and clothing bleached quickly in the sun. That's why bright colors stood out so strongly when pirates wore them. A striped pair of trousers, a deep red sash, or a green jacket stolen from a uniform. They weren't just fashion choices, they were signals. They said, "I have taken what others couldn't. I am not bound by scarcity." And yet, color also carried danger. A pirate in a bold crimson coat could look terrifying at sea, but in port, that same coat might mark him instantly as a criminal. Some pirates solved this by altering stolen clothing, cutting it down, dyeing it again, patching it into something new. In this way, pirate fashion became camouflage, as much as it was flamboyance. The same sash that symbolized fear on deck could be repurposed into something unrecognizable on land. Now, consider scars and tattoos. They weren't technically clothing, but they were part of the pirate look. Scars told stories. Each cut across the skin was a visible badge of survival. Some pirates deliberately exposed them by leaving shirts open, showing their history on their bodies. Tattoos, though less common than we imagine today, did exist. Sailors brought tattooing traditions from Polynesia, Africa, and indigenous peoples of the Americas. A mark on the arm, a symbol on the chest, these became part of pirate identity. Where society feared tattoos as signs of criminality, pirates embraced them as marks of belonging to a new world. Weapons, too, were part of fashion. A pirate without a weapon looked incomplete. The cutlass was iconic, short, curved, ideal for fighting in cramped ship decks. But pistols became perhaps the greatest fashion statement of all. They were carried not just to fire, but to show off. Many pirates tucked pistols into belts across their chest, multiple at once, so they could fire quickly before reloading. This created a dramatic image, a man bristling with steel and wood, each pistol gleaming. Even if he never fired them all, the sight alone could break an opponent's will. Some pirates exaggerated this effect. Blackbeard, for instance, famously tied slow-burning fuses into his beard and hat, so smoke would curl around his face as he fought. It wasn't just intimidation, it was theater. His appearance was designed to make him look like a demon rising from hell. That, too, was fashion as psychological warfare. And pirates weren't just performers for their enemies. They performed for each other. Clothing shaped status within the crew. A captain who dressed in finery showed not only defiance toward the outside world, but also a kind of promise to his men. Follow me, and you too will share in this wealth. A captain in rags might inspire less loyalty, less awe. Fashion became a form of leadership. The brighter the sash, the finer the coat, the more he looked like a man who delivered spoils. Yet, not all pirates followed this path. Some chose deliberate simplicity, even austerity. To them, plain clothing was a mark of seriousness, of danger without vanity. Imagine the terror of facing a man who wore no bright colors, no plumes, no gold, only dark, functional clothes, a cutlass at his hip, and the cold certainty of violence in his eyes. Sometimes less was more. Sometimes silence of style spoke louder than finery. And here's the paradox. Pirates rejected the rules of society, yet they created their own unspoken codes of fashion. Jewelry was common, but not just anywhere. It often centered around the ears, the neck, the fingers. Sashes and belts were near universal. Bare feet were normal for most, but boots, when available, elevated a man. It was a world without uniforms, yet full of patterns. Out of chaos, a new kind of order emerged, one written not in law, but in shared understanding. Now let's step into the daily life of a pirate. Picture the morning after a storm. Clothes are drenched, salt stiff, heavy with water. Shirts cling to bodies, trousers sag, bandanas smell of mildew. The men wring them out, hang them on ropes to dry in the sun. There's no luxury of wardrobes or spares. A single shirt might last months, patched again and again until it was more patch than fabric. Needles and thread were as valuable as rum. To stitch was to survive. This gives new meaning to the idea of fashion. Pirates weren't crafting looks in the comfort of a home. Their fashion was hammered by sea, salt, blood, and necessity. Every tear had a story, every patch marked an encounter. And every time they dressed, they carried those stories on their backs. But think about the symbolism. A nobleman's coat, patched and faded, carried new meaning in pirate hands. What had once been a mark of privilege became a mark of rebellion. A soldier's trousers, now striped with salt stains, no longer spoke of duty, but of defection. Pirate fashion was recycling with a vengeance, recycling not just fabric, but the very symbols of power. One of the most overlooked details of pirate clothing is smell. We can picture the sight, but imagine the odor. Salt, sweat, unwashed fabric, smoke from cannons, grease from weapons, perfume and soap were rare luxuries. Pirates smelled like the sea and death. This, too, was part of their aura. Their clothing wasn't just intimidating to the eyes. It was overwhelming to the senses. To encounter pirates was to be engulfed in their world, in all its rawness. And yet, amid this filth, flashes of elegance would shock. A silk sash against dirty skin, a velvet coat reeking of gunpowder, a silver earring glittering in the sun. This clash luxury and filth was the essence of pirate fashion. It was contrast weaponized. It said, I can crawl in mud and wear your king-s fabric at the same time. I am everything you fear, because I am both savage and noble, both low and high, and I bow to none. This is why pirate fashion fascinates us centuries later. It wasn't about trends or aesthetics. It was about identity, power, and defiance. Every choice of cloth or jewel was a statement carved into history. Pirates weren't models, they were rebels using clothing as their banner. But here lies a question worth asking. Did pirates know how iconic they looked? Did they consciously build an image, or was it all survival and coincidence? The answer, most likely, is both. Pirates were survivors first, but they were also storytellers. They knew that reputation mattered more than reality. A terrifying appearance could win battles without bloodshed. If a single feather in a hat made enemies tremble, then that feather was worth more than gold. And so, pirate fashion became legend. Not because they tried to be fashionable, but because they tried to be unforgettable. Imagine sailing into a Caribbean harbor at dusk. The sun sinks, painting the water red, and from the deck of your ship, you see figures gathering along the pier. Sailors, merchants, soldiers, each dressed according to their station. The soldiers stand in crisp uniforms, their coats buttoned tight, their boots polished. Merchants wear tailored jackets, hats angled just so. And then, cutting through the order of it all, comes a band of pirates. Their clothing looks like it was stolen from 10 different worlds and stitched together by chaos. A velvet coat next to bare feet. A ragged shirt beneath a sash of silk, a cocked hat to find for the man wearing it. The crowd falls silent, not because of neatness, but because of the defiance dripping from every detail. That was the true spectacle of pirate fashion. It is important to understand that pirates lived in a world obsessed with hierarchy. Every stitch of clothing on land signaled class. Who you were, where you stood, how much power you held, this was written into fabric. Velvet and lace for the nobility, broadcloth for merchants, rough linen for peasants. Laws even dictated what common people could or could not wear. but pirates tore this script to shreds. On their decks, stolen velvet rubbed against patched linen, and no one cared. What mattered was not what society said you deserved to wear, but what you were bold enough to take. That defiance was intoxicating. For many sailors who turned pirate, clothing became their first taste of true freedom. Imagine spending years at sea under Navy discipline, wearing uniforms chosen for you, forbidden to touch the finery of officers. Then, one day, after a mutiny, you raid the captain's chest. You pull out his embroidered coat, his fine boots, his gleaming sash. You wear them not because they fit perfectly, but because they fit your new identity. You are no longer a cog in a machine. You are free, and the world can see it in every thread on your body. This rebellion extended into hairstyles and grooming. Contrary to the polished wigs of noblemen, pirates often let their hair grow long, tangled by salt wind, sunburned and wild. Beards were rough, sometimes braided with beads or tied with ribbons, but more often simply unkempt. To polite society, this was barbaric. To pirates, it was liberation. Even grooming became a rejection of rules. And yet, some captains' men, like Black Bart Roberts, did choose elegance, keeping themselves surprisingly clean and polished, wielding refinement like another weapon of intimidation. Fashion was flexible. Some leaned into savagery, others into mockery of nobility. Both paths led to the same goal-striking fear and commanding respect. Consider how this played out during battle. When pirates launched an attack, appearance was part of the strategy. They wanted their victims to surrender quickly, to give up cargo without a fight. A chaotic, terrifying crew, bristling with weapons, glittering with stolen jewels. Clad in mismatched finery and rags, that image struck terror before the first shot was fired. Many merchant sailors, upon seeing such figures boarding their decks, threw down their arms immediately. Fashion saved lives by avoiding combat, just as surely as weapons took lives when combat began. But fashion was not only about intimidation. It was also about solidarity. On a pirate ship, crews voted for their captains, shared plunder equally, and lived by their own codes. Clothing reflected this strange democracy. Unlike navies, where uniforms marked rank, pirate crews often blurred these lines. A captain might wear a coat finer than the rest, but at heart, he was still one of them. The mixture of clothing among crew members told a story of equality. Each man, regardless of origin, could wear what he pleased. The stolen sash of one became no more valuable than the patched shirt of another, so long as both men fought and bled together. And yet, amid this freedom, symbols still mattered. Some pirates crafted reputations through distinct styles. Take Charles Vane, known for his cruelty, often dressed in dark, severe clothing that mirrored his brutality. Contrast him with Calico Jack Rackham, whose very nickname came from the bright calico shirts he favored. His fashion was his brand. When people spoke of Calico Jack, they remembered not just his deeds, but his colorful clothing. In a way, he was marketing himself. Centuries before branding became a modern concept. Even more fascinating is how pirates borrowed from different cultures. Sailing across the Atlantic, they encountered fabrics, patterns, and garments from Africa, the Caribbean, South America, and Asia. A pirate's wardrobe might include a European coat, African beads, a Caribbean head wrap, and Asian silk all on the same body. This made pirate fashion unlike anything on land, where strict national styles dominated. Pirates became living crossroads of culture, wearing the spoils of a globalized world long before globalization had a name. Now, imagine standing face to face with such a pirate. The smell of gunpowder lingers on his clothes. His shirt hangs open, scarred chest on display. A sash of stolen silk is tied around his waist, pistols stuffed into it at odd angles. One boot, one bare foot. A soldier's hat cocked sideways on his head, mocking its former owner. An earring glints, promising both superstition and defiance. He looks like madness stitched into human form. And yet, in that madness, there is method. He has crafted an image, whether consciously or not, that seizes your imagination and makes you tremble. Fashion also told a story of resourcefulness. Pirates often had to repair their own clothes at sea with limited materials. A coat might be patched with a piece of sailcloth. A torn sleeve might be replaced with fabric ripped from a flag. The result was a collage of textures, colors, and histories. Their clothing was not just stolen, it was repurposed, adapted, reinvented. This gave pirate fashion a rough creativity, a kind of unintentional artistry. Each pirate became a walking canvas of survival. Let's not forget the psychological side. Wearing stolen finery wasn't just about mocking society. It was about transformation. When a pirate put on a nobleman's coat, he stepped into a role larger than himself. He became not just a man with a cutlass, but a figure of myth. Clothing gave pirates the courage to embody their reputations. Just as an actor gains confidence in costume, so did pirates draw power from their stolen attire. The coat was more than fabric, it was armor for the mind. At the same time, fashion created internal tension. Some pirates reveled in excess, flaunting silks and jewels. Others despised it, seeing vanity as weakness. Within crews, this clash sometimes sparked conflict. Was a captain dressing in velvet truly one of them, or was he drifting toward the same arrogance they had fled? Was fashion a symbol of unity or of betrayal? These unspoken questions lingered beneath the surface. Pirate clothing was not just fabric, it was politics. And in rare cases, fashion became fate. A pirate in stolen finery might be too easily recognized in port, leading to capture. Some who escaped at sea were betrayed by their bold clothing on land. Others, however, used disguise as a weapon. Stripping down to rags, they blended with fishermen or laborers, hiding their true identities. The same coat that once inspired terror could later bring death. Fashion was never neutral, it was a gamble. Think, too, about death. Pirates often died young, but their clothing outlived them. When a man fell, his shirt, his sash, his boots were claimed by others. Each item passed from one life to another, absorbing layers of meaning. A sash worn by 3 men in succession became almost legendary, a silent witness to battles, victories, betrayals. Pirate fashion was never static, it moved, changed, evolved, carrying memory in its fabric. This is why, centuries later, when we imagine pirates, clothing looms so large in our minds. We picture the sashes, the earrings, the boots, the ragged coats. Not because they were stylish, but because they symbolized everything pirates stood for: freedom, defiance, danger, unpredictability. Pirate fashion was a language, and if you knew how to read it, you could glimpse the soul of the sea's most feared outlaws. As night falls over a pirate's world, clothing becomes more than appearance, it becomes identity in motion. Imagine a pirate ship anchored in a moonlit cove. Shadows ripple across the deck as men move about, their garments whispering against each other. A red sash brushes a patched coat. A torn sleeve catches the light of a lantern. Every movement tells a story. The fabric is alive with history, with intent. Pirates did not merely wear clothes, they performed through them, projecting messages of power, cunning, or madness without speaking a word. Some items were practical, designed to survive the brutal life at sea. Loose-fitting shirts allowed freedom of movement for climbing masts and swinging cutlasses. Breeches could be rolled up, leather boots folded, heavy coats slung over shoulders when the heat became unbearable. Yet, even practicality carried expression. The way a pirate tied a sash, folded a hat, or layered a coat conveyed hierarchy, mood, or reputation. A crew member might imitate the captain's style to show loyalty, or flaunt eccentric patterns to signal independence. Clothing was a constantly shifting social code, readable to those who knew it. Consider the symbolism of accessories. Earrings were not mere decoration, they were talismans. Some pirates believed gold or silver earrings could pay for a proper burial if they died far from home. Others wore them as charms against drowning or to commemorate victories. The jewelry glinted in the sun and struck fear at night. Belts and sashes, often holding pistols or daggers, were practical tools disguised as ornamentation. Each twist, knot, and placement spoke volumes. A sash to low or to high could indicate readiness for battle or leisure. A pirate could communicate an entire personality without uttering a word. Headwear was equally significant. Tricorn hats, popular among European sailors, became a pirate's signature. Some captains wore hats so large and adorned that they became almost theatrical, casting shadows across their eyes, making them seem larger, more dangerous. Others preferred kerchiefs or bandanas, practical for sweat and sun, but also colorful signals of individuality. A bright cloth around the head could mark allegiance to a crew or simply indicate bravado. In this world of constant threat, such visual cues were a language of survival. Colors, too, were intentional. Bright reds, deep blues, and stark blacks were often chosen for contrast against the muted sea and sky, making pirates both visible and intimidating. Yet, at the same time, muted tones could serve as camouflage during raids or escapes. A pirate's wardrobe had to balance storytelling and survival. Each piece, each hue, each tear was both statement and tool. Even the sun-bleached, wind-worn fabric spoke to the journey of the wearer, narrating storms weathered and battles fought. But let's not romanticize everything. Life in these garments was harsh. Salt and sweat stiffened shirts, leather cracked in heat, boots pinched swollen feet. Pirates had to contend with lice, fleas, and the constant damp that rotted fabrics. Yet, even in suffering, they found ways to transform necessity into expression. A patch sewn with bold colors might replace a torn section of coat, turning damage into artistry. Worn boots might be polished with ash and oil to regain dignity. Fashion became a coping mechanism, a psychological shield against the chaos around them. And then there were the stories embedded in stolen clothes. A pirate might wear a captain's coat taken in a raid, not merely as loot, but as a trophy, a challenge, a conversation starter. Each piece had provenance. A stolen waistcoat might have been seen in the grand hall of a governor, a silk sash ripped from a Spanish officer. Wearing it was a declaration: I have been where you reign, and I have taken from you. The clothes themselves became a narrative of conquest, a silent chronicle of victories. Yet, identity through clothing was not always simple. Pirates were often multicultural, and their wardrobes reflected this collision. African, Caribbean, European, and Asian influences blended unpredictably. A single pirate could wear trousers of Dutch cloth, a sash of Indian silk, a tunic cut in African style, and a hat resembling a Spanish officer's. Each layer added meaning, creating complexity both practical and symbolic. Such hybrid fashion made them seem unpredictable and uncontainable. Onlookers, unable to classify them, often assumed they were more dangerous than they truly were. There was also a performative aspect. Some pirates deliberately exaggerated their appearance to terrify enemies or entertain their crew. Blackbeard, for instance, was known to weave slow-burning fuses into his beard and light them before battle, smoke curling around his face. His coat and hat were part of this spectacle, framing the smoke, enhancing the image of a demonic figure from maritime folklore. Clothing and accessories became extensions of persona, blurring the line between man and legend. Beyond intimidation, clothing facilitated cunning. Pirates sometimes dressed as merchants or naval officers to infiltrate ports, gain trust, or lure targets into traps. The flexibility of pirate fashion allowed deception. A crew might swap jackets with captured sailors, don caps from a distant navy, or tie bright scarves to mimic foreign dignitaries. The chaos of pirate wardrobes became a strategic advantage, weaponized in both attack and subterfuge. Every stolen stitch could be a tool for survival. Social signaling among pirates was equally nuanced. Certain cuts, patterns, or adornments could indicate seniority, experience, or wealth. A man with several sashes might be a quartermaster. One with intricate embroidery might have served under a famed captain. Clothing conveyed unspoken hierarchies within otherwise egalitarian crews. Those who understood the code could navigate relationships, alliances, and rivalries more effectively. The pirate ship was a world where thread counted as much as courage. Yet, fashion also highlighted internal contradictions. Pirates celebrated freedom but were deeply superstitious, following customs that dictated how clothing should be worn for luck. They sought individuality but relied on borrowed garments to define it. They rejected societal norms but were constantly judged by them, both by themselves and by those they raided. These tensions created a rich, complicated narrative embedded in every wrinkle, tear, and adornment. Fashion became a mirror of the pirate psyche, bold, chaotic, ingenious, and often contradictory. Imagine the end of a pirate's journey. His coat ragged, his sash frayed, his boots worn to threads. He may be captured, hanged, or die at sea. Yet his image lingers. Artists, storytellers, and later filmmakers capture him not as he lived, but as he appeared, a collage of rebellion and bravado. Every detail of his wardrobe becomes iconic, and we are drawn to it because it tells the story faster than words ever could. Pirate fashion is not just history, it is myth made tangible. And finally, consider the legacy. Modern pirate costumes, Halloween outfits, and cinematic portrayals borrow heavily from this chaotic wardrobe. But they simplify it, smoothing over contradictions and danger. Real pirate fashion was unpredictable, often ugly, sometimes brilliant, always functional, and deeply expressive. It communicated fear, camaraderie, identity, and defiance. Every thread carried weight, every color carried meaning. The wardrobe of a pirate was a living, breathing testament to life outside society's rules. A story written in fabric that continues to captivate us centuries later. As the sun rises over a restless sea, the pirate's wardrobe continues its silent story. Each torn sleeve, sun-faded sash, and polished boot speaks of countless adventures, close escapes, and hard-won respect. Imagine a deck littered with the remnants of a night raid, lanterns swaying, fabrics fluttering in the wind, colors dancing over the waves. Clothing, once mere protection against the elements, now embodies history, reputation, and survival. It's more than appearance. It is memory made tangible, courage stitched into every seam. Consider the choices a pirate faced daily. Should he patch his coat with bright silk from a conquered ship, showing daring and victory, or keep it dull and practical to avoid attention? Should he display jewelry as trophies, risking envy and challenge, or hide them, trusting only his crew? Each decision, however small, became part of a larger narrative. One readable to those who understood the language of pirate fashion. These were not frivolous concerns. They could mean the difference between dominance and death, between legend and obscurity. The psychological impact of clothing was profound. Pirates dressed not only for themselves but for the eyes of the world. A flamboyant coat, or exaggerated, hat could intimidate rival crews before a single sword was drawn. A hidden dagger in a sash might give confidence in the face of mutiny. Every accessory was a tool, weaponized subtly, shaping perception and shaping fate. In a world without law, every detail mattered, every choice mattered. We must also recognize the human side of these choices. Pirates were often young men, thrust into harsh lives, separated from home and family, seeking identity in chaos. Clothing became a canvas for self-expression, a way to assert individuality in a world that demanded conformity to survival. Each patch, each stolen thread, each improvised accessory was a story of resilience, creativity, and courage. To wear such garments was to declare, I exist, I endure, I define myself on my terms. History, however, rarely captures these nuances. Stories of buried treasure and walking the plank dominate popular imagination, overshadowing the rich, intricate reality of pirate life. Fashion offers a lens into that reality, revealing the complexities, contradictions, and human dimensions of piracy. It tells us that pirates were not just chaotic raiders but creative, strategic, and expressive beings, negotiating identity and survival in every stitch and fold. Even the smallest details mattered. A sailor who braided his hair with beads or tied a colorful ribbon around his wrist communicated more than style. He broadcasted experience, alliances, or intentions. Colors were a language, textures a dialect, and every fray or stain added nuance. By studying pirate fashion, we see not just clothing but culture, psychology, and sociology in motion. And then there is the lasting impression on us today. When we see a pirate costume on screen, it evokes more than adventure. It conjures bravery, rebellion, and the allure of freedom. The coats, boots, hats, and sashes of centuries ago have become symbols of defiance and imagination. Yet, beneath the fantasy lies the gritty, human reality, the sweat, the danger, the cunning, and the creativity of men navigating a perilous world. Pirate fashion is a bridge across time, connecting myth with lived experience, dramatized for us but rooted in truth. Ultimately, pirate clothing was survival, identity, and expression woven together. Each layer, each accessory, each patch told a story of storms braved, battles won, comrades lost, and risks taken. Every pirate carried his life, his reputation, and his defiance in his wardrobe. It was practical, theatrical, and profoundly symbolic all at once. And when we look at these garments, whether in museums or in film, we are not merely seeing clothes. We are glimpsing lives lived on the edge, humanity in extreme circumstances, and the enduring power of creativity and self-expression. So next time you see a pirate coat, a sash, or a tricorn hat, remember, it is more than costume. It is a narrative of survival and audacity, a testament to the ingenuity of those who dared to live beyond the rules. Pirate fashion was chaos tamed by necessity, creativity forged by danger, and expression shaped by identity. It is a window into the past, a reflection of human resilience, and a story that continues to fascinate, inspire, and thrill. And if you've enjoyed this voyage through the turbulent, colorful, and dangerous world of pirate fashion, don't forget to subscribe for more stories from the high seas.